Hamlet, Part 3, The Mousetrap. Next day, in accordance with their scheme, the king and Polonius hid themselves behind the arras to listen to the interview between Hamlet and Ophelia. Hamlet, as usual, was meditating deeply on the problems of life when Ophelia approached and offered to restore to him some gifts which he had given her in happier days. In the sudden tragedy which had overwhelmed Hamlet's whole being, his love for Ophelia seemed something very far away, but the old tenderness was always struggling to assert itself. He tried, however, to force it down, and even assumed an air of harsh indifference, which almost broke Ophelia's heart. In apparently wild and rambling words, but really deeply penetrated with pity, he gave her to understand that all thoughts of marriage between them must now be over, and bade the young girl get to a nunnery, and that quickly, too. The hollowness and hypocrisy that he saw all around him goaded his spirit almost beyond endurance, and now another blow to his belief in human nature was to be struck. When Polonius hid himself behind the arras, it is doubtful whether Ophelia knew he was there, or, in the excitement of the moment, she may possibly have forgotten the fact. Anyhow, when Hamlet suddenly asked her, "Where's your father?" she answered, "At home, my lord." But her reply filled Hamlet with fresh scorn for the apparent insincerity of this innocent young girl. He had seen the arras stir, and Polonius's old gray head peep out. He naturally thought that Ophelia was in league with the rest of the world to spy upon him and deceive him. "Let the doors be shut upon him, that he may play the fool nowhere but in his own house," he said in clear, cutting accents when he heard Ophelia's response. "Farewell." "Oh, help him, you sweet heavens," murmured Ophelia. It seemed quite evident to her that the unfortunate young prince had lost his reason. "If thou dost marry, I'll give thee this plague for thy dowry," cried Hamlet wildly. "Be thou as chaste as ice, as pure as snow, thou shalt not escape calumny. Get thee to a nunnery. Go, farewell." "O heavenly powers, restore him," prayed Ophelia again. "I have heard of your paintings, too, well enough," continued Hamlet with increasing violence. "God hath given you one face, and you make yourselves another. You jig, you amble, and you lisp, and nickname God's creatures. Go to, I'll no more on it. It hath made me mad. I say, we will have no more marriages. Those that are married already, all but one," here he looked darkly towards the arras, where he knew the king was concealed with Polonius, "shall live. The rest shall keep as they are. To a nunnery, go!" And with a furious gesture of dismissal, Hamlet hurried from the room. "Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown," sighed Ophelia piteously. "The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword, the expectancy and rose of the fair state, the glass of fashion and the mold of form, the observed of all observers, quite down. And I, of ladies most deject and wretched, that suck the honey of his music vows, now see that noble and most sovereign reason like sweet bells jangled, out of tune and harsh. Oh, woe is me to have seen what I have seen, see what I see." While Ophelia was musing thus sadly, the king and Polonius stepped from their hiding place. The king was not at all satisfied that Polonius was right in his surmise that Hamlet had lost his reason because of Ophelia's rejected love. "Love? His affections do not tend that way," he said decidedly. Nor was what he spoke, though it lacked form a little, like madness. There is something in his soul over which his melancholy sits brooding, and I fear the result will be some danger. To prevent this, I have determined that he shall depart with speed for England, to demand there our neglected tribute. Haply the sea and the sight of foreign countries will expel this settled matter in his heart, about which his brains, always beating, makes him thus unlike himself. Polonius agreed that it would be a good plan to send Hamlet to England, though he would not give up his idea that the origin and commencement of Hamlet's grief sprang from neglected love. He further suggested that after the play, the Queen should have an interview alone with Hamlet, and try to get from him the cause of his grief, and that Polonius himself should be placed where he could hear their conference. If the Queen cannot discover the cause, send him to England, or confine him where your wisdom shall think best, he concluded. It shall be so, declared the king. Madness in great ones must not go unwatched. The play on which so much depended was now to be performed. Hamlet had inserted some speeches of his own, and before the performance began, he gave some excellent advice to the players on the art of acting. While they were making ready, Hamlet had a few private words with Horatio. In the midst of the trouble and turmoil of his own soul, his fretted spirit turned with deep affection to the quiet strength of this faithful friend. Give me that man that is not passion's slave, and I will wear him in my heart's core, aye, in my heart of heart, as I do thee, he said tenderly to Horatio. He had already confided to him what the ghost had related, and now he told him that he had laid a trap to discover if what it said were true. One scene in the play was to represent closely the circumstances of his father's death, and he begged Horatio, when that act came, to observe the king with all the power of his soul. If his guilt did not reveal itself at one speech, then the ghost must have spoken falsely, and Hamlet's own imagination was black and wicked. Give him heedful note, he said, for I will rivet my eyes to his face, and afterwards we will compare our impressions in judging his appearance. Well, my lord, if he steal anything whilst this play is playing, and escape detection, I will pay the theft, said Horatio, meaning by this that his watch would never waver. They are coming to the play. I must be idle. Get you a place, said Hamlet. The music of the Danish royal march was heard. There was a flourish of trumpets, and, attended by the full court, the king and queen entered the great hall of the castle. Old Polonius marshaled them, bowing backwards before them. Ophelia followed in the train of the queen. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, with other attendant lords, were there, and guards carried torches to light up the scene. The king and queen took their seats on thrones provided for them at one side of the stage. Ophelia sat in a chair opposite. Horatio took up his stand at the back of Ophelia's chair, where, unnoticed himself, he could watch the king's face. And Hamlet, who on their entrance had immediately assumed his air of madness, flung himself on the ground at Ophelia's feet. The play began. First, the scene was given in dumb show. It represented a king and queen who were apparently very affectionate together. Presently the king lay down on a bank of flowers, and the queen, seeing him asleep, left him. Soon another man came in, who took off the king's crown, kissed it, poured poison into the sleeper's ear, and went off. The queen returned, found the king dead, and showed passionate signs of grief. The poisoner came back, seemed to lament with her. The body of the dead king was carried away. Then the poisoner wooed the queen with gifts. She seemed for a while loath and unwilling, but in the end accepted his love. Claudius, at the sight of this scene, betrayed many signs of secret uneasiness. But he made no open remark, and the other spectators were too intent on the play to notice him. Only Horatio, from his place opposite, kept careful watch, and Hamlet, lying on the ground, quivering with excitement, never took his eyes from the guilty man's face. The Queen and Ophelia looked on with rather languid interest. "What means this, my lord?" asked Ophelia, when the dumb show had come to an end. "Marry, this is mitching malico. It means mischief," said Hamlet. "Belike this show imports the argument of the play," said Ophelia, which indeed proved to be the case. Now the real players came on, who had to speak, and the action followed the same lines as the dumb show, the player queen pouring forth boundless expressions of devotion to her husband. "Madam, how like you this play?" asked Hamlet presently, when a pause occurred. "The lady doth protest too much, methinks," said the Queen. "Oh, but she'll keep her word," said Hamlet, with biting sarcasm. "Have you heard the argument? Is there no offense in it?" asked the King uneasily. "No, no, they do but jest. Poison in jest. No offense in the world," returned Hamlet, looking at him with strange malice in his eyes. The King winced, but tried to appear unconcerned. "What do you call the play?" "The Mousetrap." "Marry, how?" "Tropically," continued Hamlet, still in the same wild manner. "This play is the image of a murder done in Vienna. Gonzago is the Duke's name, his wife Baptista. You shall see anon. 'Tis a knavish piece of work, but what of that? Your Majesty, and we that have free souls, it touches us not. Let the galled jade wince. Our withers are unwrung." The King grew more and more disturbed. He cast uneasy glances at the play, made a half-movement to rise, and checked himself. As the play went on, Hamlet could scarcely control his excitement. The players were now reciting the speeches he had written. The young prince muttered the words with them in a rapid undertone. When one of the characters poured the poison into the player king's ear, Hamlet burst out again into fierce speech, his voice rising shriller and higher. "He poisons him in the garden for his estate. His name's Gonzago. The story is extant and written in very choice Italian. You shall see anon how the murderer gets the love of Gonzago's wife." Hamlet, in his excitement, had dragged himself across the floor till he was at the foot of the throne. The King, seeing the mimic representation of his own crime, started up in guilty terror. "The King rises!" exclaimed Ophelia. "What? Frighted with false fire?" shouted Hamlet in bitter derision, and with a harsh cry of triumph, he sprang to his feet and flung himself into the throne which the King had left vacant. All was now confusion. The King and Queen hurriedly retired. Their courtiers thronged after them, and Hamlet and Horatio were left alone in the deserted hall. Hamlet broke into a wild snatch of song. "Why, let the stricken deer go weep, the heart ungalled play, for some must watch while some must sleep, so runs the world away. Oh, good Horatio, I'll take the ghost's word for 1,000 pounds. Didst perceive? Very well, my lord. Upon the talk of the poisoning, I did very well note him." It was not likely that Hamlet's behavior would be let pass without remark, and presently the two obsequious courtiers, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, came to summon him to the presence of the Queen. They brought word that the King was in his own room, marvelously upset with rage, and that the Queen, in great affliction of spirit, had sent them to say to Hamlet that his behavior had struck her into amazement and astonishment, and that she desired to speak with him in her room before he went to bed. Hamlet replied he would obey, But on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's further attempting to discover from him the cause of his strange behavior, he retorted by asking the two young men what they meant by treating him in the way they did, which was as if they were trying to drive him into some snare. "Oh, my lord, if my duty be too bold, my love is too unmannerly," answered Guildenstern. "I do not well understand that," said Hamlet, and it may be doubted if the speaker himself knew what he meant by his silly words. But the young prince determined to give the couple a lesson and show them he was not quite the witless creature they seemed to imagine. A few minutes before, he had called for music and ordered some recorders to be brought. The recorder was a small musical instrument, something like a flute. On the attendants bringing them, Hamlet took one and held it out to Guildenstern. "Will you play upon this pipe?" he asked him courteously. "My lord, I cannot." "I pray you," he begged. "Believe me, I cannot. I do beseech you." "I know no touch of it, my lord." "'Tis as easy as lying," said Hamlet. "Govern these holes with your finger and thumb. Give it breath with your mouth, and it will discourse most eloquent music. Look you, these are the stops. But these cannot I command to any utterance of harmony. I have not the skill," declared Guildenstern. "Why, look you, how unworthy a thing you would make of me," said Hamlet, his persuasive voice changing to sudden sternness. "You would play upon me. You would seem to know my stop. You would pluck out the heart of my mystery. You would sound me from my lowest note to the top of my compass. And there is much music, excellent voice in this little organ, yet you cannot make it speak. Do you think I am easier to be played on than a pipe? Call me what instrument you will. Though you can fret me, yet you cannot play upon me." The pipe snapped in his slender fingers as he tossed it contemptuously away, and the two young men stood crestfallen and abashed before his noble scorn. It was no repentant and shamefaced son that entered the Queen's room that night. Hamlet had steeled his heart to do what he considered his duty, and tell his mother the truth. He would speak daggers, though he used none. He would reveal to her the true character of the man she had taken for her second husband. When, therefore, the Queen, in accordance with Polonius's advice, began to take him roundly to task for his strange behavior, he retorted in such a strange and even menacing manner that she was quite alarmed and shouted for help. Polonius, hidden behind the arras, echoed her cry. Hamlet, thinking it was the king, and that the hour for vengeance had come, drew his sword. "How now, a rat? Dead for a ducat, dead!" he exclaimed, and made a pass through the arras. There was a cry from behind. "Oh, I am slain!" and the fall of a heavy body. "Oh me, what hast thou done?" exclaimed the Queen. "Nay, I know not. Is it the king?" said Hamlet in a harsh whisper. "Oh, what a rash and bloody deed is this," moaned the Queen, wringing her hands in dismay. "A bloody deed? Almost as bad, good mother, as kill a king and marry with his brother," said Hamlet solemnly. "As kill a king?" echoed the Queen, astounded. "Aye, lady, it was my word." Hamlet lifted the arras and found that, after all, it was not the guilty murderer whom he had hoped to punish, but the meddlesome old chamberlain who had fallen a victim to his sudden impulse. His task of vengeance still had to be accomplished. "Thou wretched, rash, intruding fool, farewell," said the young prince, gazing at him sorrowfully. "I took thee for thy better. Take thy fortune. Thou find'st to be too busy is some danger." Thus the officious old man's prying ways met their punishment, and Hamlet's lack of resolution, too, brought its penalty. For if he had the strength of will to carry out what he believed to be his duty, he would not have thus trusted to the blind impulse of the moment, and a comparatively innocent life would not have been sacrificed. But he had matters too important waiting to spare much time for regret. Letting the arras fall on the henceforth silent prattler, Hamlet turned to his mother. In the most forcible manner, he pointed out to the queen how blameworthy had been her conduct. In vivid language, he sketched a portrait of her two husbands, showing how noble had been the one brother and how contemptible was the other. What strange delusion could have cheated the queen, after knowing her first husband, to have married such a wretched being as Claudius? "O Hamlet, speak no more," implored the queen. "These words, like daggers, enter in mine ears. No more, sweet Hamlet." "A murderer and a villain," continued Hamlet, with increasing scorn and vehemence. "A slave that is not the 20th part the tithe of your former lord. A buffoon king, a cutpurse of the empire and the scepter, who from the shelf the precious diadem stole and put it in his pocket." "No more," besought the queen. "A king of shreds and patches." Hamlet's torrent of wrath died on his lips. Before him stood once more the spirit of his father, gazing at him with calm, rebuking eyes. "Save me, and hover o'er me with your wings, you heavenly guards," murmured the young prince in an awestruck whisper. "What would your gracious figure?" The vision apparent to Hamlet was not visible to the queen. She saw only the sudden change that had come to her son, and the rapt look on his face. "Alas, he's mad," she sighed. "Do you not come your tardy son to chide?" continued Hamlet, still in the same hushed voice. "Who, lost in time and passion, lets go by the important acting of thy dread command? Oh, say!" The ghost replied that his visit was indeed to whet his son's almost blunted purpose. But now he bade Hamlet note how startled and amazed the queen was, and told him to speak to her and soothe her. "How is it with you, lady?" said Hamlet absently. "Alas, how is it with you?" retorted the queen, for to her it seemed that Hamlet was looking at vacancy and holding converse with the empty air. "Whereon do you look?" "On him, on him! Look you, how pale he glares! Do you see nothing there?" "Nothing at all, yet all that is I see." "Nor did you nothing hear?" "No, nothing but ourselves." "Why, look you there! Look how it steals away! My father in his habit as he lived! Look where he goes even now, out at the portal." The queen saw nothing of the figure gliding away, and told Hamlet that it must be the coinage of his brain, the sort of delusion which madness was very cunning in. "Madness!" echoed Hamlet, and he bade his mother note that his pulse beat as calmly as her own, and that it was not madness which he uttered. Bring him to the test, he said, and he would reword the matter, which madness could not do. In short, his words were so convincing that the queen could no longer refuse to believe them. Before they parted, she promised to adopt a very different mode of behavior from her usual pleasure-loving frivolity, and not to allow herself to be persuaded by the crafty Claudius that anything her son might say or do arose from madness. "I must to England, you know that?" asked Hamlet. "Alack, I had forgotten. It is so arranged," said the queen. "There are letters sealed," said Hamlet, "and my two schoolfellows, whom I will trust as I will adders fanged, they bear the mandate. Let the knavery work, for 'tis sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard, and it shall go hard, but I will delve 1 yard below their minds, and blow them at the moon."